It's the 60th annual meetings of the African Development Bank here in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. I'm Akinwumi A. On this special highlight, we'll be bringing you key discussions and key happenings from the event that took place in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire.
Addressing the media on the first day, the outgoing group president, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, spoke about the current state of the African Development Bank and what the bank has achieved under his tenure.
The sail on our ship remains high and strong. A short recap of the journey so far. Think about the following. 128 million people now have access to improved health services. And I think you should be clapping for that, because these are not things you just find every single day. 121 million people now have access to improved transport. 104 million people are now food secure. 63 million people now have access to potable water. 34 million people now have access to improved sanitation. 28 million people now have access to electricity. And from the groundbreaking and unprecedented Mission 300 Energy Summit, jointly launched in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, by the African Development Bank Group, myself, and the World Bank, with its president, Adesina, and other partners, another 300 million Africans will have access to electricity by 2030. These are not just figures, these are futures of people. It's about hope that's been realized. Mission 300 is the most important, the largest ever effort to provide access to electricity globally. And I'm proud that the African Development Bank, we're leading on this together with the World Bank to make it happen. In my trip to Lesotho 2 months ago, I was at a school called Cote Primary School, where I got to see and feel the effects of our work on the lives and educational opportunities of children through the Lower Lesotho Water and Sanitation Project. Children now have sanitation, along with 30,000 people in the school district. Attendance has risen, and girls are now safer in schools. As I visited the only medical facility in the village, staffed by only one resident nurse, she showed me an old well where people will queue to fetch water. Today, thanks to the investment of the African Development Bank Group, every single household now has pipe-borne water. In a visit to a village in the Rift Valley of Kenya, I saw the power of change that access to electricity brings to villages through our work on the last mile connectivity project for energy, which pays for the cost of connecting poor households to the electricity grid. Now, as I walked towards the house of one of the beneficiaries, and her name happens to be Grace, and my wife's name is Grace. I'm not talking about my Grace, it's a different Grace, but thank God for grace for everybody. And she was right in front of me, and she was asked, "Do you know the African Development Bank?" And she was asked again, "Do you know the president of the African Development Bank Group?" And I was standing beside her. And she said, "I do not know the African Development Bank. I do not know the president of the African Development Bank. All I know is that we are once in darkness and now we have light."
After the opening statement, Dr. Adesina used the opportunity to address the media in a question and answer session. On the top of the media's mind was what his expectations are and advice for the incoming president.
It's not just about us. It's about our ability to work with others to actually tackle big challenges. As I always say, every challenge or every opportunity for Africa is like a baobab tree. It takes the hand of many people to be around it to do it. We have learned during that time that the most important part of our work is to be close to people, on the ground, where action is. We have also learned at the same time that speed and scale matters. And I hope from what I have said, what we have done, that my successor, or whoever that person is, will have heard, will have seen, will have learned, will have understood that the African Development Bank you have today is not the African Development Bank you used to know. This is a global institution today. So, I'm saying that because it's not an easy task to do. It's more than I can write you in one line. You have to have the spirit that that person will understand that the most important part of this bank is to carry the hope, the aspiration, the expectation of a whole continent. This is not a job. If anybody is looking for a job, please don't take this. It's not a job. This is a mission. For 10 years, I had no life. Zero. Complete zero. I work every single day, every single second. In fact, my wife, somebody wanted to see me and went to my wife and said, I would like to see the president. I've been trying to see him. It's been difficult for me to see him. And my wife told the person, when you find the president, tell me, because I am also looking for him. The responsibility of that leader is to build on the past, to look far into the future, and to find within themselves what the courage it takes to stand up for Africa's interest. To make sure that Africa's voice is never silent on the issues that matter globally and where it matters globally. And that we must never follow. We must lead. And to be leading, you have to understand that it's not you as a person that is leading. You are leading, speaking on behalf of the whole continent of 1.4 billion people who have put their faith and confidence in you, resources, and the African Development Bank. Anybody wants to? Are you sure you want this job?
Before convening the stakeholders for the selection process for the incoming group president, Dr. Adesina delivered a key message to the global audience on African Development Bank's commitment to Africa's future.
As my mandate that you have given me as president of the bank draws to a close, I am extremely proud of the work that we have done and the incredible impact of the bank has had on the daily lives of millions of Africans. This has been a collaborative effort that we all can take pride in. We maintained the stellar AAA credit ratings of the bank for 10 years under very difficult circumstances with your support, with all the three global credit rating agencies, from Fitch to Moody's to Standard & Poor's. Even in the most difficult times of COVID, And I want to thank all my governors. I knew how many calls I made. I knew how many doors I locked. I knew how many conversations I had. But I knew how much your heart was with us that helped us to survive and to continue to sail despite all the challenges. To you, our governors and countries, I say thank you. Thank you so very much. It was not an easy thing, but I'm extremely grateful to you. Your Excellencies, the independent review of the governance systems of the African Development Bank by our governors asked for in 2020 was completed about 2 months ago. The review showed that the African Development Bank is very well governed, respects the independence of its oversight organs, and is at par with all of its peers globally. In view of all that transpired in 2020, I feel vindicated and enormously happy. I am exceptionally proud of the African Development Group that I lead. We developed a new institution, the African Financial Stability Mechanism, unanimously approved by the African Union to support Africa to refinance its debt on global capital markets, reduce contagion effects of economic shocks, and be the Africa's first financial safety net. The African Development Bank, your bank, is today globally recognized and respected. Your Excellencies, the African Development Bank was ranked as the best multilateral financial institution in the world by Global Finance. Your bank, the African Development Bank, was ranked for 2 consecutive years the most transparent financial institution globally by Public Watch Fund for our sovereign operations, scoring last year 98.8% on the Transparency Index, the highest ever in the history of the Global Transparency Index. And in 2024, the bank achieved its highest income ever in its 60-year history. The African Development Fund, the concessionary financing institution of the bank, ranked 2nd best in the world and higher than all 55 bilateral financing organizations in all developed countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. As I complete my 2 5-year terms as president of the African Development Bank, I am proud of the legacy we are leaving behind, and I say we, it's a collective effort, for my successor, for the bank, and for Africa. We have built a world-class financial institution that will continue to advance Africa's position within a rapidly changing global development and geopolitical environment. I did not walk alone. I walked with an exemplary group of people at different points during my past 10 years. I am thankful for the exemplary support of the boards of directors over the past 10 years, for your strong support, for your strong oversight over our work and operations. And I'd like my board that currently are here today to please stand and be recognized. It's my time to recognize my board of directors. Wherever you are, please stand and be recognized, and I appreciate it. Thank you. They're a very tough board, but we get things done. I am very thankful to you, our board of governors. You have been simply incredible, and you have given us exceptional shareholder support.
Over the next few days, key stakeholders gathered to hear from each presidential candidate vying for the position. Holding the meetings behind closed doors, each candidate stated their case. But what does this election process entails?
The African Development Bank has one of the most democratic processes of electing the president of the bank, compared to many other multilateral development banks. Now, what normally happens is that by the time a president is elected for 2 terms, and when the president's tenure is coming to an end, a year before, the process for the new president begins. Now, at the annual meeting of the year before the president's term ends, the steering committee of the board of directors responsible for the election of the president will meet and sit and consider a timetable that they will recommend for the board of directors to adopt to setting the stage for the next process. Now, if you do recall, in Nairobi, 2024, based on the recommendation of the steering committee, the Board of Governors set a calendar that notices for expression of interest for candidates from regional member countries should go out on the 1st of July, 2024. So the process started with that notice going out from my office on the 1st of July, 2024, for a 6-month period of appreciating which country will submit candidates. And that process ended on the 31st of January this year. So after the end of the process of submission of candidature, the steering committee will meet again to vet the candidates, to ensure that they meet the requirements established in the agreement establishing the bank in terms of qualification to be president of the bank. After that is done, they authorize my office to publish the list to the entire world, and that list was published on the 21st of February, 2024. And after that meeting, what followed next was the stages that led to today, whereby the date of the election was set to be able to elect a new president. And that's why we're here today.
Just last year, we had the 10-year strategy of the bank. So what are the mechanisms within the bank to ensure that the incoming president aligns with the vision of the bank in terms of how it's going about the development?
Well, the 10-year strategy is a bank document approved by the Board of Directors and endorsed by the Board of Governors.
Yeah.
And what that means now is that whoever is coming in will need to plug in. Okay? Of course, the person can adapt it, but it's an existing document. It's more or less the policy document in terms of the strategy that the bank will for the next 10 years. Just like when the current president came in, there was a strategy, but he developed the high fives, which somehow were adapted within the new, the then existing 10-year strategy of the bank. So everybody has a way of working within what exists, but of course with some adaptability based on what they bring and the vision they sold to member countries.
We caught up with some of the presidential candidates during the week as they still campaigned for votes. We found out why they feel they should be elected as the new group president.
We worked very hard since end of September, traveled around Africa, around the world, meeting our governors, our shareholders, leaders, and also meeting in Africa some entrepreneurs as well.
Sure.
To hear from everyone.
Yeah.
And then, formulate our offer, our pitch, our vision based on that.
100%. We're going to come back and talk about what's that offer, what's that vision. Talk a little bit more about the temperature in the room, as it were, as we wind down.
I think everybody is expecting something great to come out of this election on Thursday. I think it could be a close race. Anything is possible, because it's a mix of technicalities, of politics, of diplomacy, and so no one knows really what the outcome would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we know, of course, for one to win the presidency, you need a double majority, as they call it. So I wanted just to begin, first of all, by talking a little bit about the work that you have done amongst the African shareholders and stakeholders.
Yeah. I want to precise that double majority here means majority of the African votes. Africans have 60% of the bank.
Yes.
Non-African 40%.
Yes.
So to win, you need to have majority of African vote.
Yes.
And majority of the total.
Right.
Not majority of non-Africans.
The non-Africans. No, it's majority of the total.
The total.
Right.
And majority of
the
Africans.
Okay.
So you cannot win without having the majority of the Africans.
Sure.
So that's why I've traveled quite a lot across Africa. I can't tell for now how many countries I've visited. That's a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And it made me also realize how difficult it can be also to travel across Africa.
Aha.
I wanted to go, let's say, from one country to another.
Yeah.
Direct flight is 1 hour and a half.
Sure.
And there were no direct flights. And then it's like 24 hours. You have to go through somewhere. So regional integration, very important.
Absolutely.
Connectivity, very important.
Yeah.
And I think we'll talk about that as well.
100%, because that's what I was going to come to talk about the key messages that you have been delivering to shareholders. So tell me, what exactly are you telling them that, in your view, makes you the candidate that should take the African Development Bank forward?
Whether it's non-regional, meaning the non-Africans or African shareholders, people care about impact.
Right.
People care about delivery. People care about a bank that is more agile, that cuts lead time, that has stronger operations, that is less bureaucratic, because MDBs are seen as to be generally bureaucratic. And so my message has been that as the next president, I will tackle those things from day one. Because even if you have a lot of resources, you have a lot of projects, you have a lot of ideas, you got to make sure that the machinery is delivering fast.
It's the last sprint.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your chances?
First of all, I'm just feeling strong. I'm excited. I think this is important. It's important for the African Development Bank. It's important for the continent, and it's important for our future. So I'm excited, I'm energized, and I think that we have a competitive campaign.
Yeah. Who are you directing your energies towards?
In terms of what?
In terms of trying to get support, in terms of trying to pitch your message.
For me, it's very, very important that I have the support of all 81 governors, because whoever becomes president will report to all 81 governors.
That's true.
And so I am not picking and choosing who I engage with. Anybody that wants to engage with me, I engage with them. So I take every opportunity to engage with the governors.
Absolutely. So voting hasn't started. So I still would like to know the message that you are pitching to those that you are pitching to.
So the message that I'm pitching is that Africa is at an inflection point. We know what's going on in the world right now in terms of geopolitics, in terms of trade. And I think we're at a time now, especially with the decline of concessional resources and the decline in terms of donor funding, where we really need to think differently about development finance, where we need to rely more on ourselves, where we need to put our hands together and actually focus on lifting Africa, which is my vision. Lift Africa is about large integrated infrastructure, which is a precondition for accelerated productivity, because productivity is the one that allows the private sector to thrive and allows them to create jobs for our young people. The F in Lift Africa is about financial innovation, and I think in the context where we are seeing declining financial resources, we have to innovate. I've already done that for the bank. I'm ready to do it again, and this is very, very important. But of course, we will do this in partnership with the private sector, because they are going to be key in making sure that we develop Africa and Lift Africa. And of course, the T in Lift Africa is about transforming the bank itself, making sure that it is fit for purpose, it is fit to operate in this new world, and can do so sustainably, working in partnership with the private sector, with other MDBs, with national development banks on the continent, with institutional investors. So for me, this is very, very important.
Absolutely. The gender question. So I've been speaking to governors, I've been speaking to people who are hanging around here, talking, lobbying, etc., and it comes across in two sides. One positive, one that says maybe not. Is it hindering you? Is it helping you?
No, I don't think about it. As far as I'm concerned, every human being on this continent has a right to have aspirations, has a right to pursue their dreams. So I am not deterred. It has not been my experience, to be honest, in my engagement with the governors. So I don't know who you're talking to. I think the governors are used to seeing, certainly in the top structures of the bank, women leading. So I doubt very much that any concerns about gender are coming from them.
CNBC Africa also took the opportunity to hear from some shareholders. What are they looking for from the next president?
I imagine you're meeting your counterparts from across the region, and of course, these are very important meetings this year, the election of a new president. Let's again speak from a Tanzanian perspective, what you are looking at.
Yeah, we are looking, and actually we'll be voting for continuity and change. We will expect the good things we had from President Adesina, the portfolio, the projects, the good direction of the bank, where we have been moving and benefiting as Africans, and at this time of volatility in the financial market, where the African Development Bank is expected to do much to our economies. And for sure, we'll be looking for new things as well, and that is the change. We'll be seeing what are the new vision, what are the new issues to be introduced within the bank, and perhaps which will be dynamic to cover the volatility which we are experiencing now as economies.
As a shareholder, what kind of leader do you want?
For sure, we would expect the one who will keep the continuation of the good things the bank has been doing. More specifically, the focus of the bank on strategic projects which leaves good change of lives to the people. And for sure, we'll be expecting the dynamism which will cover the volatility of the external shocks we are experiencing as countries, as African countries, and change of external policies which in one way or another have great impact to our economies.
SADC and COMESA are split. We've got two candidates, even though SADC came up with one consensus candidate. I wanted to know whether that makes it difficult for a candidate from the region to win the presidency.
Yeah, it's not hard because we have been caucusing, we have been discussing, we know each other, we know the candidates, we know the focus of the bank, so I don't think that is a tough thing.
Looking at how important Nigeria plays a role in terms of voting now, what are your takeaways from the screening exercise?
Well, I think this is a very well-run event. It is the annual meetings of the African Development Bank. And of course, we all know that top on the agenda this particular year is the election of a new president to take over from President Akinwumi Adesina, who has been at the helm for the last 10 years. The discussion today revolved around listening to the 5 candidates and putting questions to them about their views on the resilience, what can be done to support fragile states and to bring more resilience to countries that they are supporting. And secondly, there were questions about private sector participation and what also they would do to grow the organization. So I think that they all acquitted themselves well. They all are quite familiar with the operations of the African Development Bank. And Nigeria, as the largest shareholder, clearly will have a big say in which way the voting actually goes. But I think that at this stage, we are looking at continuing to interrogate with the different contestants what they will do to bring more resources to the African Development Bank and therefore to the members and the customers, the lenders, or rather the borrowers of the bank, because we've all seen that we're in an environment where overseas development assistance, concessional flows to Africa have actually gone into reverse, where we are giving out in repayments more than we are getting in new funding. So that puts financing and funding at the top of the agenda. But likewise, I think another concern of members, regional and non-regional shareholders, is the issue of governance. It has been on the table, and so it remains a matter of concern to ensure that the governance of the organization is top-notch. We know that it has won awards, in fact, for its governance, but still there have remained one or two concerns. And these are some of the key elements of the interactions and the interrogation of the different contestants.
It's a big election year. You're a shareholder. I want to know what kind of outcome you're looking forward to.
Well, you know, the election for the president is a very important moment in the bank's life, frankly. So as an African governor, African finance minister, we're looking for a strong leader, a clear leader, a clear-headed leader, someone with a clear vision that will move Africa to the next level. The leaders through the African Union processes have come up with the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has been launched, supported by all governments, basically. That needs to be enacted, and want a leader who can see potential in that and support that kind of growth in the African market, where Africa can begin to trade more with itself.
Yeah.
We need a leader who will be clear about how Africa can use its own resources to move forward. We've seen now the collapse in the ODA support into Africa. Every country is looking inwards. Overseas development assistance is shrinking. In fact, it's already shrunk, affecting the health sector. We need a leader who can help Africa realize or rather generate resources from its own natural resources, for example.
Sure.
How do we increase, domestic resource mobilization? That is critical. We want a leader who can, lead Africa in dealing with the infrastructure gap, with the gap in human capital development, with the gap in youth development, for example, job creation, entrepreneurship support for the youth, and all of that. We need clarity, we need strong leadership, we need someone who's forthright going forward. And can also support the initiatives of the member countries themselves, not to ignore what the countries themselves are trying to do, support that as well.
I'll be provocative and say, do you see any of that in the 5 candidates that are standing before you later this week?
Yes, I see that.
You do?
I see that in the candidates who are before us this week. Of course, we'll interrogate them further as governors of the bank to see who really is the person. But at the end of the day, it's about how we vote.
100%.
It's about how also they've campaigned, how they've positioned themselves.
Have you been swayed so far?
Of course.
Have you identified the one?
I've been swayed. I've been swayed, being from the SADC region. You can imagine. That's where you start.
From a regional bloc,
You start from the regional bloc. From the SADC region. That's how we do it. And then, look, hopefully we're successful. But if not, then we have to think of other candidates in other regions. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So, Minister, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Are you disappointed that the region is split? Because we've got 2 candidates that are coming from Southern Africa, and yet the unspoken rule within the bank, and you're an staff of the bank, the unspoken rule and the consensus is always that we shift this leadership within the region. And here we are, Southern Africa hasn't had one in I don't know how many decades, and we are split. Does it bother you?
Frankly, it would have been better if we had one candidate for the entire region. The fact that we have 2 does present challenges, splits votes, and so forth. But it is what it is. So we have to live with it. It is not illegal for regions to have more than one candidate. It's perfectly within the bank rules. But this was just strategy. It's always a good strategy to have one, but it is what it is. We live with it. We'll work with it. Besides, both our candidates from that region were found to be appointable.
A lot of work has been done. For us, it is about presenting a competent African to head the institution. And our candidate has done a lot of work before to prove himself that he's a competent person. The fact that he joined the World Bank as a very young person, the fact that over the years he's risen from a mere economist to a vice president of a World Bank is testament to the fact that along the way people could see his competence, his abilities, because out there, unless you show those traits, you don't get anywhere. So for us, we thought this was an opportunity to pick this African who is from Zambia, offer him to the African Development Bank.
Absolutely. So you've been doing a lot of campaigning, you've been talking to your colleagues and other shareholders here. How are his chances looking, given there's very fierce competition, as we know, from the other four candidates?
The chances of winning are obviously good. I rate them as very high. We must remember that this is a competition of professionals. So the candidates are all good, but there's only one position of a president, and we must get the very, very best. And so far, our candidate has been able to demonstrate to the people that he speaks to, people that he engages, that he has a clear vision for the continent, a clear vision of how the bank itself should operate so that it can deliver more to the citizens. He's a very competent person.
Absolutely. One of the unwritten rules, and I speak like a journalist who has covered this story for a long time at the African Development Bank, is that leadership of the institution is shared regionally. And some have been arguing that it is Southern Africa's turn, given it was a long time ago, in fact, before another Zambian was president who was able to serve a term. So does the fact that we've got two candidates from Southern Africa complicate the chances of a Southern African winning?
Yes, I fully endorse the idea that rotation must always be there, because performance sometimes is also shaped by where you come from, your cultural background, the networks that we have. So if it is concentrated, if leadership is always concentrated from one region, then you deny the institution the diversity of thought, habits, and traits to uplift the institution. Now, of course, we would have loved to have had 100% unity from Southern Africa in terms of presenting one candidate. That has not happened because we have a candidate from Zambia. We also have a candidate from South Africa. It's no point crying about it. That is the reality. So it is competition. But we also believe that at some point there might be an opportunity for SADC again to coalesce together, depending on how the rounds of the elections are.
As you represent a very significant stakeholder in Africa, which is the capital markets, and what would you say are your expectations of the new leadership of this bank?
African Development Bank has been a phenomenal institution in Africa's growth, and I think the past presidents, including the immediate one going out, Dr. Adesina, have been phenomenal. And we're looking forward to the new person. What do we expect from the new person? We expect leadership that centers African capital markets at the forefront of the solutions to Africa's developmental needs. I want to see an AFDB that undertakes African investor roadshows. An AFDB, when it thinks of roadshows, doesn't think only of investors outside of Africa, but one that comes to Accra, Abidjan, Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg, and actively engages the institutional investors there, talks about how we can issue domestic products, leads the way in getting green bonds, social bonds listed across all the stock exchanges of Africa, that looks at equity financing. We spend a lot of time talking about debt financing.
Equity is quite important.
Equity financing is at the heart of innovation and growth and sustainability. So an AFDB that works in partnership with us and says, how do we get equity financing, give opportunity, not just to our institutional investors, but our retail investors. The retail investors account for the $125 billion that left Africa last year. People have money in their pillows, under their wardrobes. The only thing is that we don't have tools for them to invest in. AFDB can be an enabler. Our governments, by putting the state-owned enterprises on our markets, can be enablers. And so we're really excited about the next phase. But that excitement comes only if we put capital markets, private and public, domestic, so that the wealth that many of these institutions create outside of Africa, Africans can participate in.
On the fourth day of the annual meetings and after enduring long hours, the voting and elimination round started. After the first round, presidential candidate from the Central Region of Africa, Mr. Abbas Mahamatoli, was eliminated, securing less than 1% of the regional vote at that time, leaving Amadou Hott, Samuel Maimbo, Swazi Shabalala and Sid Utah still in the running. After the second round of voting, Swazi Shabalala was eliminated, leaving Amadou Hott, Samuel Maimbo and Sid Utah in the top three.
Tough campaign, but I guess it's the will of the shareholders and the majority, right?
Yeah, it's the will of the shareholders and the majority, and a substantial majority for that matter.
Yeah. From a South African perspective, Minister, what went wrong with the campaign?
No, there's nothing that went wrong with the campaign. My sense is that first we started late. Secondly, we didn't put much resources in going into all the other countries. I mean, one of the candidates was telling me before the elections that he crisscrossed the country into 52 countries on the African continent. Something we didn't do. I think we've got to learn a lesson that you don't start your campaign late as we did. Secondly, your campaign must not be over the phone. You've got to go and hit the country. People like that. They want to see you on the ground talking to them.
Yeah.
Never find time. In particular, in my case, the budget process at home had an implication that I couldn't leave the country at all.
Absolutely.
So there are a lesson to be learned.
Absolutely. 100% lessons learned.
If I can tell you one of the things, there's a lot of goodwill towards South Africa.
Sure.
That's what I can tell you in this campaign. A number of countries, in fact, would reflect what South Africa has done for them. And that to me was heartening. So it's in that sense that I think we didn't put more weight in terms of visiting people and talking to them.
For sure. So I've been covering the annual meetings of the bank and the election of the leadership. And I remember coming across this suggestion that one of the unwritten rules of the bank is that there is diversity in terms of where the leadership of the bank comes from. And we have seen East, West, North come and get the presidency. But Southern Africa since the 1960s hasn't had a presidency. So is it a fair argument to say, honestly, it should have been our turn?
It was had a long time ago, 40 years ago.
Painful years ago.
Yeah, 40 years ago. Mind you, if it rotates, you must understand, it's going to come back to you later. Our chances are going to come again in 10 years' time.
That's true.
Look, that also created a tension. The tension amongst ourselves on in SADC, precisely on this principle of rotation. I mean, because we're of the view that Zambia, the last time in SADC, it was in Zambia. Our view was that then it should be open to all other countries in SADC. We've never had one.
Correct.
That created a tension. I think that tension also had an impact in the performance of both Zambia and ourselves. It is something we should have avoided.
It wasn't long after the second round when the last two candidates were eliminated, leaving the African Development Bank with a new and ninth president. Mauritanian candidate Sidi Utah scoring 76.18 of the total vote and 72.37 of the regional votes in the third voting round.
It was at this very special hall Sidi Utah was elected as the president-elect of the African Development Bank.
With great humility and a keen sense of duty that I address you at this particular moment. First and foremost, I would like to thank Africa for the trust it has just vested in me. I would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, governors, for this trust, which I clearly sense the sense of duty and responsibility that they carry. I would like to thank my country and the President of Mauritania, President Mohamed Ould Sheikh Ghazouani, who sponsored my candidacy and provided undying efforts leading to the outcome, to this outcome today. I would like to thank all of my brothers and sisters from Mauritania and from across Africa for the huge demonstration of solidarity which has carried my campaign. I would like to specifically highlight my team for their remarkable effort from the beginning stages to the very end. Please receive here my most heartfelt recognition and gratitude. It is also my duty to thank all of those who have supported my candidacy from afar or from close up. Of course, I cannot name them all at this particular moment.
Now let us go to work. I am ready.
Thank you. Shukran.
What do you make of the candidate that the bank has ended up with? What are your thoughts?
Two things. From a skills perspective, I think he comes from a different bank. So for that reason, the banking environment is not new for me. So I think he's going to be able to perform. And I'm told he's a humble man. I don't know him. People who know him, they think he's a humble man, and for that reason, he's likely to get more support from the governors of the bank, and with South Africa included.
Yeah. Have you been able to have a chat with him?
Not yet.
Okay. What would you like if you were to engage him? Then what would you engage him on, Minister?
Look, the key for me is the footprint of the bank.
100%.
At the moment, the allegation amongst governors is that the footprint of the bank is concentrated in specific areas, in particular in certain big areas, South Africa included. There are countries that feel that they are marginalized, both from an investment perspective and from the footprint in terms of offices and so on.
100%. So you would like to see that expansion to other countries, to other nodes of the continent?
Yeah, to other regions of the continent.
A new leadership has emerged there. But for you, how important is continuity of vision for Africa at this time, especially with the uncertainty we're seeing playing out globally and how Africa should approach development outcomes this time?
Well, this continuity is very important. Last year at the African Development Bank, the bank was developing a 10-year strategy. So it was crystal clear that also the new presidency should implement that strategy. And there are a lot of important things in that strategy, which we also discussed at the Governors' Dialogue. It's about youth, it's about private sector, it's about employment, creating jobs here on the continent, but doing it in a sustainable way, in a way we protect the environment, we protect or adapt also to climate change, and in a way where it's inclusive, so women are included, young people are included, and that kind of strategy, I think, is something to really continue and to strive for and to implement on the continent.
Yeah, because now we're looking at the main theme this year for the bank's annual meetings, which is making African capital work for the continent. You know, I'm trying to imagine for Germany, you know, how do you think the continent should go about it? On one hand, trying to mobilize local capital, and also on the other hand, balancing international partnerships, especially with non-regional shareholders like Germany.
You know, we as Germany are quite happy if African countries decide what they want on their own future, on their own policy. For us, important is to support in a way where it's necessary or needed or wanted, especially if it's come for domestic resource mobilization, which is important. And I'm talking not about the VAT tax, I'm talking really about tax system administration, things like that. That is important. I think we have a lot in common where we really can work together for global public goods, for topics which are important for both sides, for Germany, for African countries. We need to adapt to climate change, we need to mitigate, we need to invest in infrastructure and energy, renewable energy. We need to invest in young people and the women, and we need to bring the private sector on board. If we all collect that, I think we have a lot of topics together in common, and I'm very happy that we can work on those topics together.
I'd like you to speak to, you know, this new appointment, what it means for the bank's transition and the next 10 years of development work on the continent.
First, I would like to congratulate Dr. Sidi Walata for being elected as president of the African Development Bank. This African powerhouse, as we call it, as an institution. And we wish him every luck. We have already had a 10-year strategy produced by the outgoing Dr. Adesina. And that if Dr. Sidi Taha succeeded in implementing that strategy, then Africa will grow faster, the young people will get employed, gender will be taken care of, we'll add value to our products, and we'll be more dependent in our food. We will have our food security. In addition, we'll have less debt stress, and we'll have more integrated Africa, building the needed infrastructure that connects us all together. So I think we have a strategy that will bring us together to face, because Africa by 2050 will be more, our population will over the size, the joint population of China and India together, and will be 1/4 of the population of the world. So we have to make sure that we are feeding our people, we are educating our children, we have our health services are meeting our the standards needed, and we have a prosperous Africa which is free of any sort of new colonialism.
Yeah, definitely interesting times for the development outcomes and the projection for the next 10 years. But I'd like to focus on the theme for this year's annual meeting, which is making African capital work for Africa's development. And this is talking about Africa looking inwards now, because we're seeing geopolitics as we know it's changing. Multilateralism, as we've known it over the years, is also not as it was. So it means that Africa needs to be more strategic in terms of how it goes about mobilizing capital. And I'd like you to speak to that theme and why that is crucial, especially at this time.
What we are saying, actually, this time Africans should not go begging for money. Rather, we would like to mobilize domestic resources. And we would like to build Africa as much as we can with African resources. This means that we have to put our hands together. We have to have the same pocket like the African Development Bank. Then from there we can draw wisely and use the resources in a very wise way. When we do that, others will come because they discover that they will benefit more when they invest with us. So we would like to lead our own investments in the African continent.
As per the bank's procedure, the incoming president will only take office in September.
Now, help us appreciate how the transition then will play out
With this declaration of a president-elect today, we are getting into the transition mode. Between now and the 31st of August, it's all a lot of transition activities. First of all, we will make contact with the president-elect to, engage with him on the transition. And thereafter, he will have to put together a transition team that will work with the bank to transition to the new administration. Of course, there can only be one president at the same time. The tenure of this current president only ends on the 31st of August.
Yeah.
So until that happens, we're only in transition.
Okay.
And that's all we can take on this special highlight of the 60th annual meetings of the African Development Bank. Of course, I'm Akinwumi A. Until next time, bye for now.